what's being proposed is an ordinance that would require certain building sites and certain construction sites and renovation sites and demolition sites to apply for a permit through the fire marshal's, through the office of the fire marshal, for hot work if they're intending to conduct hot work there. Hot work is anything that involves the use of heat. For example, welding uses an arc. The electrical arc heats up the air and thus heats up the metal. The metals melt into each other. Pardon me. If you're sweating a pipe, if you're talking about soldering, you have a flame. The flame heats up the metal melts and forms a bond between the two copper pipes, right? If we're talking about what's another hot work? If we're talking about using a torch to liquefy an adhesive product for roofing materials, that's what we're talking about here. That's what hot work is. And I'm going to probably have to put together a video and just go to the shop with my cameras and say, all right, this is what this tool is. This is what it does. This is how it works. This is what hot work means. Because I think this is a case where, too, we've actually gone on principle and also in practice too far in this matter. So we're going to get in. I want to get my thoughts on the matter in just a bit. But the first thing I want to do is say that I don't yet have a link to the text itself. The copy of the ordinance that I had, proposed ordinance, was something I had to go to the town clerk and request, and I only got one and had to hand it over to somebody. I let somebody else have it at the end of the town council meeting, and I forgot to get down to the town clerk's office. So tomorrow, hopefully I'll be able to get that. The link to the ordinance for the cannabis proposal is in the video's description for the cannabis public hearing. And yes, I did separate those two hearings out so you guys can have better access to that and you guys can more easily access that information. We're going to get into that. So we're going to, when I get that link built, when I get that document brought onto the internet, because it's not on the internet right now, you have to request a physical copy from the town clerk's office. I'll get that link out to everybody. In the meantime, the closest we can do, because it's kind of long, I didn't have time to transcribe this. And quite frankly, I'm not going to bother to transcribe this. Here's Pete Bass reading the ordinance for everybody.
And to read the hot work permit ordinance, section 5B-24, hot work permit required and permit fee. Any non-residential building work activity, including new construction, renovations, demolition, addition, roofing, plumbing, steel fabrication, and the like involving hot work as set forth in the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, Standard 51B, NFPA 1, Chapter 41, as is amended, shall require a permit issued by the New Milford Fire Marshal pursuant to an application on the form furnished by the Fire Marshal and the following Fire Marshal inspection before commencing work. The fee for a hot work permit shall be $50. Section 5B-24A, hot work defined. Hot work is any activity or process that involves open flames or that generates sparks or heat and includes but not limited to welding and allied processes, heat treating, grinding, thawing pipes, powder-driven fasteners, hot riveting, torch-applied roofing, pipe sweating, and any similar applications producing or using sparks, flame, or heat. 5B-24B, inspections, work standards, and fire watch. Permittees must schedule an inspection of the subject premises before beginning hot work and must employ a fire watch. All hot work and fire watch activities must be conducted in compliance with and conformity to NFPA 51B and NFPA 1, Chapter 41, standard as amended and adopted by the state of Connecticut. 5B-24C, hours of hot work, duration of permit. Hot work activity may only be conducted between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. Hot work permits are valid from the date of issuance through 6 p.m. Friday of the same week of issuance. Hot work outside the above defined parameters must not be undertaken without express prior approval of the fire marshal. 5B-24D, enforcement, appeal. Any persons or firm that violates the provisions of this ordinance shall be issued a notice of violation and assessed a civil penalty of $200 per day for each day the violation continues. A violation may be appealed pursuant to the provisions of Connecticut General Statutes 7-152C.
So remember those definitions, because we're going to come back to that. And it was a lot to digest, but the part that everybody needed to focus on was the definitions there, and especially because of at the end where it says that use or produce sparks, flame, or heat. Use or produce sparks, flames, or heat. Remember that, because we're going to come back to that. I got some video for you on that matter, so you won't have to have it completely memorized, but let's put a pin in that thought before we move on. But most importantly, again, as we focus on the what right now, where does it apply? It applies on non-residential properties. So this is only commercial. This is not residential properties. This is Fire Marshal Reynolds, I think, from Mayor Bass.
And Kevin, there's been some conjecture like, I'm at my house and, I'm doing a little work in my own house. Does this apply to residential?
Absolutely not.
Only for commercial, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin.
So then to further specify what this applies to, Councilman Cosgrove, points out that this applies to from that definitions, construction, etc., renovation, demolition, etc., not regular and ongoing work at, say, like an auto body where they do all of this welding on a regular basis in that one location. This is clip 9.
And I think you clarified this in the original council meeting, but just for the purposes of the public tonight, this only applies to construction, renovation, repair projects in commercial buildings. It does not apply to businesses in town that use welding routinely, like body shops and that sort of thing.
No, because they have safeguards in place already in the daily aspects of their business.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
So we've gone over the what. Now it's time to go over the why. And quite frankly, we've beaten this topic to absolute death on this show over the course of this year. We all know why. And the answer is, sadly, reactionary politics. And reactionary politics to the New Milford High School roof fire. And as I explained in a previous episode of the show, reactionary politics is the worst politics. And this is why you wind up producing policy like what we're seeing here. Again, the cannabis ordinance, there's a pathway to me being okay with it. I don't know if there is with this one here, but Mayor Bass and Fire Marshal Reynolds make this undeniably clear that this was the origin and impetus for this ordinance.
I'd like to ask our fire marshal, Kevin Reynolds, to come up and explain to the public and to the council the reasons stated that he believes, and I believe, that we need a hot work ordinance. And Kevin, before we start, I know there was some conjecture about, does the town really need this? Kevin, are you aware that Litchfield School had a fire?
Yes.
And do you know anything about that fire in Litchfield?
All I know is it was on the roof, and from what I heard, I did not talk to any official up there, that it was caused by a torching process.
So we had another school roof that caught on fire due to hot work. That's kind of right up the road from our town.
Right.
And Kevin, as our fire marshal, do you believe this is something that we need to do?
I believe, yes, it is something we should definitely do to protect the assets of the town and the businesses in this town.
Plain reactionary governance, which is why there's also essentially no existing law to compare this to, unlike there was with the proposed cannabis ordinance. Rainer DeBella explains the legal origins.
The reason, first of all, I drafted that statute. Essentially, I didn't lift it. I drafted it because the ones that I looked at were, in my opinion, my experience, inadequate. The reason I did commercial is to avoid the plumber sweating a pipe on a water heater. That's why it was done. And I didn't find any other ordinances that had been drafted related to residential property. The fire marshal instructed me to make sure that I limited this to commercial property, and that's what I did. It was drafted again, essentially from scratch. So the reality is that the blending of OSHA regulations and the blending of NFPA regulations is something that had to be done in order to craft this ordinance, and that's where it came from.
So let's talk about the reality, which is that with this ordinance, this isn't going to prevent anything. This isn't going to prevent anything, especially when the contractor is doing hot work when they've been explicitly told not to, or they just plain and simple violate the rules regarding fire watch. I mean, all this does at best, this is a CYA. At best, this is covering your behind, but you're not really covering your behinds after the fact when it's not town property. Again, we talked about this with the cannabis ordinance. There is a liability that the town has to its properties. A town does not have liability to not its properties. The calculus here would be completely different if it was limited to town properties, but it's not.